Okay, good evening. Welcome everyone. Welcome back to independencelive.net. Tonight we're going to be having our big second vote debate. So Scottish parliamentary elections are almost upon us. Campaigning has begun, but there's still one big outstanding question. What do you do with your second vote? Okay, so tonight I'm joined by the co-convener of Solidarity, Tommy Sheridan, and also the Scot Goes Pop blogger, James Kelly. So Tommy, first of all, if you'd just like to introduce yourself, let everybody know who you are and what you're about.
Hi David, I am Tommy Sheridan, as you've already said, and I'm the co-convener of Solidarity, and I'm on tonight to discuss whether the Yes community should positively use their second vote for pro-independence candidates.
Thank you very much. James Kelly, you're the Scot Goes Pop blogger.
Yes, I am. I write about opinion polls and about elections and things like that. And I'm just concerned that people are being misled about how the electoral system works, and that people may think they're voting tactically in a way that will help the independence cause, but in fact it will backfire. So that's my main concern.
Okay, fantastic. So we're not going to mess around too much. What I'm going to do is a very old-fashioned coin toss. So would you like to call heads or tails, guys?
Heads.
Okay, James, you've called heads. Tommy, your tails. Give me 1 second. And it is actually heads. Okay, you have to take my word for it, but
Okay.
It is heads. Okay, and I'm going to ask James whether you would like to speak first or second.
I'll go second, please.
You want to be second, okay? So, okay. I'm going to ask, as per the Scottish Parliament, for you to take 4 minutes to outline your point, your case, okay? Once we've followed from the 4 minutes each, Speaker 2 will interrogate Speaker 1 for 5 minutes, and then Speaker 1 will interrogate Speaker 2 for 5 minutes, and then we can go to viewer questions. Okay?
It's extremely formal.
Well, you know, I just don't want it to all be a mess. Okay? So, Speaker 1 is Tommy Sheridan. So, Tommy, please, I'd like you to speak for 4 minutes and just outline your case for why the second vote should be used for other... Yeah, okay. I won't outline your case for you. Tommy, please.
David, hopefully you can let me know, as they do in the Scottish Parliament, when you've only got a minute left, so that
I'll do that.
I don't invade any of James's time. I know I don't formally have any hats on right now, and your viewers will therefore be confused if I say I'm wearing 2 hats tonight when I'm not wearing any. What I mean by saying I'm wearing 2 hats is I am the co-convener of Solidarity, and I am therefore very much hopeful that the Yes family across Scotland will decide to give their second vote to Solidarity on May the 5th. However, I'm also going to be wearing my grassroots Yes campaign hat. And what I mean by that is to say that if you don't give your vote to Solidarity, I hope you do, if you don't, please give it to another pro-independence, anti-austerity party. The reason I say that is because the voting system that is used at the Scottish Parliament elections is radically different from the voting system that's used at the general election. If this discussion was taking place at this time last year, I would be on this debate arguing for everyone to lend their vote to the SNP. I would be arguing for everyone to use the one vote that they've got to maximise the independence vote, the anti-austerity vote, the opposition to Trident vote. That's what I did last year. I have to say I lost some friends, some political friends who thought I was going too far, and they thought that it was wrong for a socialist to call for a vote for the SNP. I fell out with some people, we lost some people from our party, so it was costly. But do you know what? Sometimes in life, causes are much bigger than parties. And last year, I think it was vital that the cause of independence was put before the narrow party political interests of Solidarity. This time around, however, you've got 2 votes. And when you vote constituency for SNP, as I will be doing, and I hope most of Scotland does, and the opinion polls, the 18 opinion polls I've looked at over the last 4 months, every single by-election, and of course the most important poll of all was the general election last year, every single poll shows that the SNP are heading for a majority, and some people suggest, some of the polls suggest, they can win as many as 70, perhaps even 73 of the first past the post seats. I hope they do. The Liberals still held on to 2 in 2011, and one of them, as you know, is up in the Orkneys. I think given what Mr. Pico has been up to, I hope they lose that. If you give your second vote to the SNP, because the SNP are going to win so many first past the post seats, your second vote is diluted. In Glasgow, if 100,000 people vote SNP with their second vote, and the SNP win all 9 constituencies in Glasgow, as they will do, then that 100,000 votes is turned into 10,000 votes. That, in any way, shape or form, is what constitutes a wasted vote. Please don't allow the unionists to hang on in there because we don't use our second vote properly. If we use our second vote properly, we don't just get an SNP government, which is what is going to happen in May the 5th, but we get an independence opposition. We get people who are going to be a positive opposition. Give your second vote to a pro-independence party.
Thank you very much, Tony. Thank you very much. That's 4 minutes. Okay, so I'm going to now ask for James in 4 minutes. I'll give you a little 1 minute just before we finish. Okay. So, James, in 4 minutes, can you please set out your case?
Well, Tommy said that the electoral system is radically different, and it is radically different, and it's also radically different from, for example, the voting system that's used for local council elections, where you can actually give your second preference or your third or your fourth preference to perhaps another pro-independence party, not your first choice. And you can do that in the sure knowledge that it's not going to harm your first choice party in any way. And that's literally true. On a single transferable vote, you cannot possibly harm your first choice party by giving lower preferences to other pro-independence parties. It can only be a good thing. It can only harm the unionists. It can't possibly harm the pro-independence camp. That's not the case with the additional member system, which is used for the Scottish Parliament. So let me think. The list system, if you think about the general election, how seats are distributed, obviously last year at the general election, the SNP only got half the votes, and yet they got almost all of the seats. So the list system kind of correctively tries to make the overall composition of Parliament, list seats and constituency seats combined, proportional to how people vote on the list ballot, not on the constituency ballot. So the list ballot, in theory, should be the more important vote. It's not quite as simple as that, of course, because when Labour set the system up, they gave us more constituency seats than regional list seats. They thought that would help themselves. So, it's possible to win a majority on constituency seats alone, but in general, the list vote is the more important because the overall composition of Parliament is proportional to how people vote on the list. So what I would say really is that you should vote for your first choice party on the list, because that's your banker vote. That's the one you can be sure of, that regardless of what happens on the constituency, as long as you vote for your favourite party on the list, you can be sure that your party will get the seats that they deserve. And that's how a proportional system is supposed to work. There's no question of helping the unionists, as I've heard Tommy say. It's, what's going to happen here, what we're talking about here, I don't think it's possible, but Tommy thinks it's possible to sort of hack the system and to get a situation where there are far more pro-independence MSPs than the pro-independence vote would actually justify. I don't think that's possible, but let's say for the sake of argument it is possible. What are we actually losing if that doesn't happen. All that's happening is that the unionist parties are getting exactly the number of seats that their vote would justify, and that's democracy. You know, it's if you want to reduce the number of unionist seats, the logical way of doing that is to reduce the unionist vote. Do it the hard way, do it the honest way. Actually go out and, okay, thank you, 1 minute to go. Convince people that they should vote for a pro-independence party instead of a unionist party. That's the honest way of doing it. What's the point of trying to cheat unionist voters out of the representation when it's not going to work anyway, in my opinion? Actually, I'll just stop there. I think that's enough to be getting on with.
Okay, no, that's fine. Thank you very much. That's excellent. Okay, so we've heard the case. It's been set out. Now, what I'm going to do is allocate 5 minutes for, and we'll begin with Speaker 2, who was James, to interrogate Tommy for 5 minutes. So, and then we'll change sides. All I want to do just now, guys, is just ask you to appeal to your better nature. Let's set a good example, because we've had some very, bad examples on mainstream media. I'm not going to mention Anas Sarwar and his performance. So, guys, when somebody's asking you a question, please concentrate on trying to provide an answer, and you'll get your 5 minutes as we swap over. Okay, so James, I'd like you to interrogate Tommy Sheridan for the next 5 minutes, please.
Okay, Tommy, would you agree that a lot of your case depends on opinion polls and on your interpretation that because of what the opinion polls are showing, that the SNP will likely win almost all of the constituency seats? Would you agree, therefore, that it's also important to look at what the opinion polls are saying about how many list seats Solidarity, Rise and the Greens are likely to win?
Part of the answer is yes, James. It does depend partly on opinion polls. It depends partly on the general election result in May of last year, and it depends partly on the very real by-election results that we've had since the general election last year. And what has happened in the opinion polls, in the general election, and in every single by-election is the SNP have romped home. What you had last year was an increase in the SNP vote, not of 10%, not of 15%, not of 20%, an increase of the SNP vote of 30%. Scotland changed last year. It was a political earthquake. And the idea that you would look at, say, Solidarity and say, well, they only got 1% 2011, or they only get 0.5% in 2011, there's no chance of them getting 5% in May, is obviously not taking into account the change in Scottish politics. I say to you, James, and I ask you to consider this. Do you think it's unrealistic that the SNP are going to win all 9 constituency seats in Glasgow?
Oh, well, no, it's not unrealistic, but it's not 100% certain, no.
James, sorry, Tommy.
Sorry, David, that was my fault, James. I shouldn't have asked that question. I apologise. I'll ask it when we're interrogating you.
Okay.
So that's you getting a wee warning about it.
Okay.
Anyway, you have to continue interrogating me.
Okay, right. And not all opinion polls, of course, give Solidarity a figure, so it's not, the opinion poll evidence is a bit patchy, but would you concede that the most recent opinion poll that I could find gave you 0.3% support on the list?
I'm glad you found an opinion poll that mentioned this, James, because...
Well, the Ipsos Mori poll did, yeah.
Oh, and when was that, James?
Probably I can't remember, it was a few weeks ago.
The reason I'm asking is just out of interest, because I've searched all the opinion polls that I've been looking at, and we don't get a mention. So it's not a surprise that we don't register in the opinion polls, because nobody's getting asked about us.
Well, we were in the Ipsos Mori poll.
That's not a surprise. I've also got to say, regardless of whether I like this or not, the truth is that I personally am probably better known than my party is. And if the question was asked, would you vote for Tommy Sheridan's Solidarity Party, then I would predict that it wouldn't be 0.3%. I'm not saying it's going to be 5 or 6%, but I'm absolutely confident it would be more than what Ipsos Mori got in their opinion poll. I'm a wee bit of a Marmite character, James, as you know. Some people despise me and some people like me. And in that respect, being recognised is helpful when it comes to the second vote. I think it is absolutely critical. You talked earlier about unfairly or I think it was dishonestly punishing the unionist parties. I've got to say, I don't care how I do it. I want to punish them because they lied to us, they bullied us, they cheated us in 2014. If I can wipe out the red Tories, the blue Tories and the Lib Dem yellow Tories, I want to do it. I want to make sure they get as few seats as possible, and the way to do that is for those who are indie supporters to use their second vote for pro-indie parties, not for the SNP, because it's a wasted vote for the SNP. Because if you look at Glasgow, you're absolutely right, it's not certain. Listen, it's not certain I'm going to be alive tomorrow, it's not certain. But I think, given the opinion polls, the general election and the by-election results, I think the idea that the SNP winning all 9 Glasgow seats is pretty much in the bag. That means 100,000 people voting SNP in Glasgow will reduce to 10,000 being counted. That's 9 out of 10 votes will be totally wasted.
Would you agree that it's more rational for a voter who was thinking about voting tactically? I don't think it's possible to vote tactically in the list, but wouldn't you agree that it would be more logical for them to vote for a party that is currently predicted by the polls, to the extent the polls actually predict, to win 5 list seats, rather than the party that is predicted to win 0 list seats? Don't you have to take into account what the polls are saying about the parties that you're suggesting the tactical vote for?
James, it's not possible to divide this up like a birthday cake. But I've just talked there, and it's totally and utterly impossible to dispute this. But if the SNP win all 9 Glasgow seats and 100,000 people vote for SNP in the second list, the SNP only gets 10,000 votes. So see those 90,000 votes. See if 30,000 each were to vote for the pro-independent party. We could reduce the unionists to 1, at the most 2 seats at the election in May the 5th. I, James, believe that politics is about change. And I think we've got a very, very enlightened electorate in Scotland. And I think through debates like this we're having on Indie Live, more and more of them will think, actually, that's right. I'm not going to waste my second vote. I'm going to use it to punish the unionist parties.
Okay, guys, I think that's maybe 6 minutes we've done there. But thanks, that's been a great contribution. Viewers at home, get your questions lined up just now, because after this interrogation, we're going to go to what the viewers think, and then we're going to get a more free-flowing discussion. So now it's time for speaker number 1, which was Tommy, to interrogate speaker number 2, which is James. Okay, so I'm going to give you 5 minutes, okay? And the 5 minutes starts now. On you go, Tommy.
James, you asked me if my premise of my argument was reliant on opinion polls, and I said to you, yes, part of it was opinion polls, part of it was the general election, and part of it was the real by-elections that have taken place since May of last year. Can I ask you this? If in Glasgow the SNP win all 9 constituencies, do you accept that 1 out of every 10 second votes for the SNP is all that will count? In other words, 9 out of 10 votes will be wasted.
No, that's a very silly way of looking at it, because actually the vote is divided by 10. So if you like, your vote counts for a 10th. But there's a very pernicious thing that's creeping in, where people are saying that a vote for the Green Party or a vote for Rise or a vote for Solidarity is therefore worth 10 times as much as a vote for the SNP. But in fact, there are 2 basic facts about how the electoral system works. One is that for each list seat that's distributed, the vote for each party is divided by however many seats you've won, they've already won plus 1. That's one basic fact, which is indisputable. The other basic fact, which is indisputable, is that there are only so many seats in a region. There are a maximum of 17, there are a minimum of 15. So that means it's not a perfectly proportional system. It means you have to get over a de facto threshold to win any list seats at all, which is the threshold is about 5 or 6%. And so if a party falls short of that, and if it's likely to fall well short of that, if you know in advance that Solidarity or Rise is likely to fall well short of that threshold, and I think that's the case for Solidarity in 7 out of 8 regions, I think it's the case for Rise in all 8 regions, then that vote is not worth 10 times as much. It's not worth anything at all in a tactical sense, because it's not going to result in any seats at all.
Do you accept, James, that in order to pursue your argument, you are being deliberately pessimistic? Because what you're suggesting is that 10,000 people could not be convinced to vote for a pro-independence party like Solidarity in a city like Glasgow, given that the 7th seat in 2011 was won on the basis of 10,260 votes. Are you suggesting that it is impossible for the Yes family to use their second vote wisely and tactically, that they just won't do it? Is that what you're suggesting?
First of all, just before I answer that, I just want to make a point that you kept saying that the SNP have won every single by-election. That isn't true. There have been 1 or 2 they haven't won. Can't remember exactly which they were, but I can recall they didn't win every one. To go to the Glasgow thing, I would actually accept that you have a chance of winning a list seat in Glasgow. I think, based on your own personal profile, I think you do have a chance of doing that. That's not to do with tactical voting, that's to do with your own personal appeal, I think. But if you're asking me, is it possible to get a large number of people, tens of thousands of people, potentially hundreds of thousands of people across Scotland to vote tactically upon demand, then I don't think that is possible without the invention of this elusive mind control ray, which is going to get such a huge number of people to do exactly what you want them to do. What is actually going to happen is a small number of people are going to do this. There's not going to be the huge numbers that would be needed to, as could theoretically happen, break the system and get 80, 90, 100 pro-independence MSPs, which is what your aim is. But there could be a small number of people doing it, and that would be just enough, potentially, to trigger this big danger of tactical voting which backfires, which is that we might lose the pro-independence majority, which is a big danger.
James, I have to interrupt you there, because obviously my premise was that the SNP would win a majority of the Parliament in the first vote. Now, a majority, as you know, is 66.
65.
In all of the opinion polls that we have been looking at, the minimum that the SNP are looking at first past the post is 66. Most of them say 70 plus. So it's wrong to say that by using your second vote for another pro-independence party, you're going to undermine the pro-independence majority in the Parliament. The pro-independence majority in the Parliament is going to come via the first past the post vote. What we are going to do by giving the second vote to the pro-independence parties is making sure the unionist parties are punished, and in particular, and this is and I'm sure you share my fear here, is in some of the regions of Scotland, even the racists of UKIP could scrape in on the basis of 5%. Wouldn't it be better, James, to have pro-independence candidates than the racists of UKIP?
Okay, James, just want to answer that question. I'll let you go over time, just
okay.
If you want to answer that.
Well, there are a lot of points there. The UKIP thing. Survation is the only pollster that I know of that shows the UKIP getting any seats at all. But if that was correct, for example, you would want to vote for a party that actually is going to get less seats. If your only priority is to stop UKIP, you vote for a party that has got a realistic chance of less seats. So Solidarity and Rise are not going to be top of that calculation. I mean, the poll of polls average that I've got shows the SNP on 5 list seats, the Greens on 5 list seats, so it's not possible to tell which of those two would be the better tactical option. So you'd be better voting for your first choice party between those two. It shows Rise with no list seats at all. It shows Solidarity with no list seats at all. So if you want to stop UKIP, for heaven's sake, vote for a party that actually has a chance of winning list seats. Don't vote for a party that doesn't have a chance of winning list seats and could actually let UKIP in. You'd almost be better voting for Labour, the Tories.
Guys, that's fantastic. Tommy, sorry, we went right over the time that we had there. So that's brilliant. What we're going to do now is we're going to see if we can get some comments from the viewers that are watching. Okay, this is the really important part. We're trying to actually get people thinking about how to vote here. So, Kevin, is there a question come in from Donnelly, is that correct? Kevin? Just tell me at my ear. Okay, Donnelly. Okay. Okay, so okay, guys, I'll just read that out so the viewers can hear it. Okay, so sorry, Kevin, can you just give me that again? So 14,000 votes. Okay, so I can't remember the entire thing, right? So only 14,000 votes switched from the SNP to Solidarity in Glasgow. Uh-huh. Okay. Right, I get you now. Okay, so it would only take 14,000 SNP votes to switch across to Solidarity or another pro-independence party, anti-austerity party, but it would take 140,000 to get another SNP vote on the second vote. That comes from Donnelly. So, James, what do you make of the maths there? Do you agree with that? Is that correct?
Well,
Under the Hunt system?
I mean, in the literal sense, it's probably not far off. But I mean, I don't think Glasgow is the best example because I think Tommy does have a genuine chance in Glasgow. My concern is elsewhere because I think actually the SNP have a better chance of a list seat in Glasgow than Tommy does. But elsewhere, I don't think Solidarity have any chance of a list seat at all. I don't think Rise have any realistic chance of a list seat in any of the 8 regions. And these are sort of fantasy numbers, you know, like if we move 14,000 votes here, we move 14,000 votes there. We don't have the mind control ray. It's going to be small fry. There was an attempt 5 years ago to persuade, it was very similar to this. It was an attempt to persuade people on the AV referendum to spoil their ballots, to scrawl the word independence on the ballot. This was supposed to be a big game changer that would turn the AV referendum into an independence referendum. And thought, oh, we'll get social media, we'll persuade people, it'll go viral. And tiny, tiny numbers of people did it. You know, you're not going to persuade. Okay.
I did it.
You're not going to persuade thousands of tens of thousands of people to do it, but you're going to persuade a small number of people to do it, and that could actually be harmful if those votes are wasted, if they go to parties that don't win any list seats in the region at all.
Okay, Tommy, are people being deliberately pessimistic? That's how you've put it.
I'm afraid James is being deliberately pessimistic. You know, he was a wee bit scoffing there about social media. I think what James has to bear in mind is we started off the independence campaign with around 20% of support in the polls. And we were hammered by the official media. We were absolutely hammered by the BBC and its horrible bias, the newspapers in Scotland that spurned pure lies every single day. People were bullied, people were misled. But do you know what? We went from 20 odd to 45%. Now, the point about that is that was a victory for social media over corporate media. James talks about this mind ray, this stupid mind ray idea. We don't need mind rays, James. We've got social media, we've got Facebook, we've got Twitter, we've got Indie Live, we've got other Skype debates. We can actually rationally discuss these things. And when you keep talking about risk, wasting votes, you've already accepted the premise that if the SNP win the first past the post seats, as the opinion polls predict they will, then voting for the SNP with your second vote is a wasted vote if you're a pro-indie campaigner. The Yes family was asked last year to vote for the SNP. Many people who were former Labour voters last year decided, no, I'm not voting Labour ever again. I'm a yeser. I'm voting for the party that's likely to bring independence. I'm voting SNP. 30% rise in the SNP vote. Some people said that would be mad if you were to go back 5 years and say, by the way, the SNP are going to win 56 out of 59 seats in Scotland. Everybody would be saying, take him to the loony bin. He's talking rubbish. Get the white coats. It happened, James. It's called political change, and it's coming.
James, you were shaking your head there. Would you like to come in?
Well, I think, first of all, I mean, this 20% figure that we supposedly got the yes vote up from, it was never as low as 20%. If you exclude don't knows, which is the only meaningful way of doing it, it was the lowest it ever got was about 33%. So, I mean, what we did was, which was a great achievement, was we got maybe from the mid-30s to the mid-40s. Fine, that's a fantastic achievement. I don't know where the evidence is that that happened on social media. I mean, it was a mixture of mainstream media.
Put it that way, James.
Well, I mean, it was certainly aspects of it were things like Alex Salmond's performance in the debate. It was doorstepping. It was all sorts of things. I mean, I don't think that social media was the main driving force there by any means.
We could argue all night about the proportionality of it. What I'm saying is social media is a powerful tool in the hands of activists who are voiceless otherwise. The corporate media is owned and controlled by those who represent the establishment and want to keep status quo. The social media can be used to shake up the status quo, and that's what we're doing.
The other point I want to pick up on, I want to pick up on the point about SNP vote. I'm conceding the idea that SNP votes on the list are wasted. I am most certainly not conceding that. We don't know what the constituency results are going to be, so that's one point. But even if the SNP do clean up in the constituencies, you can see from projections of polls right now that even when it's assumed that the SNP are cleaning up in the constituencies, they are still winning a relatively small number of list seats, but they're still winning maybe 4, 5, 6 list seats. Solidarity are winning 0 list seats. Rise are winning 0 list seats. It's unclear how many the Greens will win, whether it'll be more or less than the SNP. So it's not at all clear what the best tactical option, even if tactical voting was realistically possible on the list.
Okay, guys, thanks very much. I'm going to take a question from a viewer. I've got Craig Sheridan, so in 2011 in Lothian, so we're talking here about Lothian, SNP got 110,953 list votes. They got nothing. Green got 21,505 on the list, and they got an MSP. So do you think that the smart second vote in Lothian is to vote Green? I'll put that to you, James, first.
Right, well, it's interesting that Lothian is the example, of course, because Lothian was the only region out of 8 that the SNP didn't win any list seats in spite of the fact that they won this incredible landslide. So that gives the lie to the idea that SNP list votes are always going to be wasted if they're doing well in the constituencies. That's one point. The second point, of course, in Lothian, there was the vote for Margot MacDonald, which is up for grabs now, and it's possible that there will be a disproportionate rise in the SNP vote, and it will take them to the point where they could well win one list seat at least. It's possible even that the SNP could win one list seat and the Greens could win 2. That would be the ideal scenario, but that won't happen unless people vote for both the SNP and the Greens. So I would suggest that people should vote for their first choice party on the list, which is how the system is supposed to work. The list vote is the more important vote. It does determine the overall composition of Parliament. So just vote for what you believe in, and if enough people vote SNP and if enough people vote Green, hopefully we'll get the delightful outcome of 1 SNP list seat, 2 Green list seats, and fantastic for the pro-independence movement.
Okay, Tommy, vote with your heart, your head.
Well, you see, last year at the general election, it was very, very important that you voted your head. You voted for the only realistic independence party, and that was the SNP. You only had one vote. You had to use your head and vote independence. This year, you can vote with your head. First vote SNP, and then you can vote with your heart. Second vote, pro-independence, anti-austerity, take your choice. If your choice is you want to vote Green, vote Green. If your choice is solidarity, vote solidarity. But all I'm arguing tonight is that to vote SNP with your list vote, and James has to accept this, to vote SNP with your second vote simply doesn't count. Because they are going to win the first past the post seats.
That's crazy.
In Lothians in 2011, the SNP didn't win all the first past the post seats. In 2016, they're going to win all the first past the post seats in Lothians.
We don't know that.
Past the post seats in Glasgow. The only world that they won't win is in the pessimistic world of James.
Okay, there is a question that's coming here from... Okay, if you need to reply, on you go.
Look, the opinion polls at their lowest are showing the SNP on 50%, which is exactly what they got last year at the general election, where they didn't win all 59 seats. There were 3 they didn't win. There were 4 where they only won by a narrow margin, and they certainly could have lost. And you also have to take into account the fact that there will be tactical voting from unionists on the constituencies. And on in single-member constituency seats, tactical voting does work. And so there's a danger that even if the SNP do as well as they did last year, that they could fail to win seats here and there. And honestly, this business of voting with your head on the first vote and voting with your heart, i.e. leaving your head at home on the second vote, is crazy. The second vote is the vote that determines the composition of Parliament. You can't make this emotional case for what you should do with your second vote if it's going to be head and heart for both votes, surely.
James, okay, I've got a point here which has come in from Denolly.
The list vote. That's just not the case. Because if the SNP win the projected number of seats that they're likely to win, they have won a majority in the first vote. So the list will have no say on the composition of the Parliament other than who is the opposition.
This is the point that's come in from Denolly. Now, he points out James here is a polls expert, and he asks, what is the probability? So it's probability we're talking about here. What's the probability that the SNP will win 65 out of the 73? What's the probability, James, of the SNP taking 65 or more?
I don't see how you can answer that, because polls are snapshots, are not predictions. No, you can't answer. Tommy, you can't answer that, because polls are snapshots, not predictions.
You've been asked for your probability. I mean, be honest here and say that's the honest answer, isn't it?
Oh, come on, Tommy. Look, what you're doing here is you're saying you should look at.
I'm saying it's very likely. Look what you're saying.
Come on, you're telling people to look at the polls in terms of what it's saying about the SNP constituency vote, and you're telling people to forget all about the polls when they're saying that Solidarity are going to win no list seats at all. That is an incredible proposition. If you're
We've already established, James, that out of all of the polls that you've studied, you've seen Solidarity mentioned once.
No, I've seen them more than that. I just told you that was the most recent one I saw. Now, come on, you've got to look at both sides.
I've not seen any of them. I've not even seen the one that you said were mentioned once. But anyway, that's not the point. The point is, you've been asked, the guy has asked I'm sorry, I think it's a guy, I don't know if it's a guy or a girl, but
I was trying to ask
what is the probability of the SNP winning at least 66 first past the post seats? What's the probability?
Right, now I will try and answer that question as I was trying to do before, which is it is impossible to calculate the probability because polls are snapshots, they are not predictions. Polls tell you what...
It's a cop-out, mate.
Can I finish this answer?
See if you've been asked to comment See if you've been asked to comment on one poll. I could accept that answer. You've been asked to comment on 18 polls.
Can I answer the question now, please?
Tommy, please let him answer. Thank you.
Polls are snapshots, not predictions. They tell you how people... Polls in February tell people how people might vote in February. They don't tell you how people will vote in May. Polls are also not necessarily 100% accurate, as we should know now of all times after last year's general election when the Conservatives did far better than we thought they were going to do. So it is impossible to work out the probability, but what I can say is that it is certainly possible that the SNP may need less seats to get their majority. You know, it is certainly eminently possible. There were seven seats out of 59 in last year's general election where the SNP either didn't win or they were very close to not winning. That is very similar to the proportion of seats, 9 out of 73, that if the SNP didn't win this year, that they would need at least one list seat to win a majority. And I think people do care about whether the SNP have a majority on their own. They also care about whether we're going to get a pro-independence majority, which is what tactical voting puts at risk. Needlessly, absolutely needlessly, because we're chasing something that doesn't matter. There's nothing we could do with 80, 90, 100 seats. It's just a lovely bonus. But we could do everything with 68 seats that we could do with 80, 90, 100. So we're chasing this lovely bonus and putting at risk the really important thing, which is the pro-independence majority. That's what matters. It's going to be easier to win a pro-independence majority this year.
You've had an awful long time to answer now, and I've got to say, you are talking rubbish because there is absolutely no chance of endangering the independence majority.
Guys,
using your vote for a pro-independence party. You have been asked here, and I really think you've been disingenuous, to say the least. You've been asked by someone to give a probability based not on one poll, not on two polls, but in At least 18 opinion polls since May of last year, every one have had the SNP on a minimum of 50% first past the post. They are going to win a minimum of 66. I predict 70 win first past.
You're saying the probability, Tommy, are you saying the probability is 100%? Tommy, are you saying the probability is 100% that the SNP will win at least 65 constituencies? That's incredible.
But if you want 100% certainties in life, don't leave the house, because you might get knocked down with a bus, for God's sake. Come on.
I mean, you're talking about me being disingenuous when you're putting forward the fantastical proposition that people are wasting their vote voting for the SNP, when even the opinion polls right now, even though they're snapshots, not predictions, even when they're showing right now that the SNP would win 5 list seats, you're saying that is a wasted vote, and you're saying that voting for Solidarity, who are perhaps on 0.3% of the votes...
James, what's your argument here? Because you're saying the polls are unreliable, but you're using the polls to do down Solidarity. Come on, mate, you can't have it two ways.
You can't have it two ways.
You can't cut this cake two ways here, mate.
Tommy,
if the polls aren't that reliable, how can you say that Solidarity is not going to win a seat?
Exactly.
Come on. What's clever, James?
You are asking people to vote tactically on the basis of opinion polls, and you are telling them to ignore the opinion poll evidence, clearly showing that Solidarity
are even
light years, not
I'm
even
saying the
light
opinion
years
polls show the SNP are going to win a majority on the first past the post seats. You can't dispute that. You just can't dispute it. But then what you're saying is, these polls might not be right, but when it comes to Solidarity, they're right. Believe it when it comes to Solidarity, but not when it comes to the SNP. You want your cake and you want to eat it here, James. Come on, sir.
Come on, you're the one having your cake and eating it. Look, Tommy, yes, the polls about Solidarity could be wrong, right?
The cake.
All right, the polls about Solidarity... Can I speak? Come on, let me speak. The polls about Solidarity could be wrong. Okay, they could be wrong, and you could win seats. Okay, that's possible, right? So you therefore have to concede logically. This is an absolutely unavoidable logical point. If the polls could be wrong about Solidarity, they can also be wrong about the SNP. And if they can be wrong about Solidarity, that means the SNP may need less seats. They may fall well short. If they can be wrong by miles about Solidarity, you must concede they can be wrong by miles about the SNP. And the SNP might even need loads of less seats. That's a logical proposition. You surely have to accept that, unless you are trying to have your cake and eat it about opinion polls.
Right, guys, I'm going to come in here with I'm going to take 2 points at once from the viewers. Donnelly, once again, and also Karen Kelly. Both of them are directed at Tommy. Donnelly's mentioned here, would Tommy accept outside of Glasgow? So we're talking here outside of Glasgow. Outside of Glasgow, tactically, voting Green would be a better bet. And Karen Kelly says, can you ask Tommy how well known his party is outside of Glasgow? So, Tommy, in terms of outside of Glasgow, does Solidarity really have a popular grounding outside of Glasgow?
The truth is, Solidarity in Glasgow, around myself, I'm well known in Glasgow. I was a councillor for 11 years. I was an MSP for 8 years. Of course, I'm better known in Glasgow, and of course, we have a better chance in Glasgow. There's no doubt about that. That's just a fact. Outside of Glasgow, Solidarity is less known. There's no doubt about that as well. What we are asking for is not 20% of the vote, not 10% of the vote. We're asking for between 5 and 6% of the second vote. Now, we know you can't engineer that. We know we're not going to be able to actually engineer that this 5% and that 5% vote in a particular way. But what I am saying in principle here, and this is where the principle comes into Karen's question. In principle, I'm asking you as the co-convener of Solidarity to give your second vote to Solidarity everywhere in Scotland. But if you're not going to give it to Solidarity, I'm also asking you to give it to the Greens or one of the other pro-independence parties rather than the SNP in the second vote, because I believe it will be a wasted vote. So in other words, it's both a party political plea, I'm going to put my hands up for that, but it's also a cause plea. It's a cause plea because I'm saying, if you're not voting for us, fine, I can accept that. Not everybody knows about us, not everybody might support us. We've got some radical policies, but people might not like them. For instance, we want to come out of Europe. We think the European Union is a boss's union. We want to come out. So you might use that as a reason. No, I'm not voting for Solidarity. But don't then give it to the SNP if you're part of the Yes family. Give it to one of the local independents.
Tommy, I'm just going to give you one question and then I'm going to give James a question, and then we're going to draw things to a close. Okay. So
okay. I thought we were just getting started.
Right. Okay. Craig Sheridan has asked, and this is for you, Tommy. Okay. Craig Sheridan has asked, what beneficial influence could Tommy or an alternative pro-Indy candidate have in the Scottish Parliament? So, what's the benefit of another pro-independence candidate in the Scottish Parliament? This is your case.
I was elected in 1999 as a single socialist in the first Scottish Parliament. Within 3 months, I introduced a private member's bill to abolish pindings and warrant sales. I was told I had no chance because I was on my own. A year later, we passed the abolition of pindings and warrant sale bill, and we got rid of something that was a scourge across the whole of Scotland. The commitment Solidarity gives at this election is within 3 months of any of us being elected, we're going to present the Indy Ref 2 bill. We want to commit Scotland to an Indy Ref 2 by 2018. We think we were cheated, we think we were lied to, we think we were bullied. We want our independence, we want our freedom, and we want to vote for it in 2018. A vote for Solidarity is a vote for an Indy Ref 2 bill by 2018.
That's brilliant. Okay, James, I'm going to bring you in here. I've got a question here from Donnelly again, and Donnelly's asking, if the polls can't be trusted, then why does James blog about them every day? So, what's the case for your blog?
Polls are interesting of themselves. You want to know how people are thinking at a certain moment in time. They are snapshots, and you can tell what the trends are. You want to see what trajectory public opinion is on. But what I would say is that tactical voting is not, in principle, impossible in some electoral systems. In single-member constituency elections, all you need to know is what the top two candidates are. Then you can work out who your favourite of those two candidates are and vote for that person, and either that person will win, or they won't win, in which case you're no worse off than you would have been, because the winning candidate would have won anyway. That isn't the case on the list. You need a really precise level of foreknowledge to make sure that there's no chance of your votes backfiring. You need to know the results in all of the constituencies in your region. That's the first thing you need to know. You need to know whether the party you're giving your tactical vote to is going to get over that threshold, the de facto threshold, the need for at least one seat in the region. And you may think you know that, but look what happened to the Greens in 2011. The polls were showing very much what they're showing now, and they only ended up with 2 seats, and they fell short in 6 out of the 8 regions. And you would also need to know, for example, you would want to know whether your first choice party is going to do so well on the list that they might, even with the DeHont formula kicking in, maybe dividing them by 10, they might even win several list seats anyway, and you might have wished to voted for them. So, I mean, polls just can't give you the sort of foreknowledge where you can feel like, yeah, I'm tactically voting in a rational way. In other electoral systems, it's possible, but the list system just isn't responsive to tactical voting. You should really vote for what you believe in.
Okay, well, we're really asking about your blog. So, what can we actually get from your blog? What's the core purpose of it?
Well, I was just trying to explain that polls can tell you quite a bit, but they can't give you that kind of precision of foreknowledge. They can give you they can give you a ballpark figure, but they can't give you that kind of precise knowledge because, for example, tactical voting will come and you can't look at the national constituency vote and say, well, that means that if that was the exact vote that the SNP would definitely win, say, 63 seats, because you don't know what the constituency spread is. You don't know how people will vote tactically. We saw last year that, particularly in formerly Liberal Democrat held seats, that the Unionists were proving quite resilient, and that was because people were switching to the Liberal Democrats or to the Tories or whatever. And in Jim Murphy's seat, probably a lot of Conservatives voted tactically for Jim Murphy. So it's just not possible to have that kind of precision of foreknowledge for tactical voting on a list. It's possible in constituencies, but the purpose of opinion polls do not exist to make tactical voting possible. They exist for a completely different reason.
Okay, I've got a comment here from Brian McHugh. Brian McHugh says, I like passionate debate. It's healthy and the referendum gave us it. So it's definitely been very passionate tonight. If there aren't any more questions from the viewers, then I'd like maybe if we'll move back over to Tommy, and if you want to maybe just give us a sort of a closing statement, Tommy,
sure.
And then we'll move over to James.
Can I just thank Indy Live for the opportunity to have this debate. I hope you will have several others on this issue and on other important issues. I return to my core premise, and my core premise is that every opinion poll, every by-election, every indication that you possibly can have shows that the SNP are going to do very well in May the 5th and will win upwards of 66. I predict 71 to 73 of all of the constituency seats. I think they will win a majority first past the post. The question for the Yes family then is, do we have a unionist opposition, or do we have a positive pro-Indy opposition that puts on the table banning fracking, that puts on the table Indy Ref 2 by 2018, that puts on the table abolishing the council tax and replacing it with a fairer income-based alternative, that puts on the table the idea that if they don't give us a referendum down in Westminster, then we declare unilaterally for independence. That's the type of positive left opposition I want to see in the Scottish Parliament, and it's in the hands of the voters. You've got 2 votes here. Use your first vote for independence. I'm going to be voting SNP. I hope they win all of the constituency seats. Use your second vote for a pro-independence alternative. Whether that's Solidarity, the Greens or anyone else, use it for a pro-independence, anti-austerity alternative. Thanks a lot.
Thanks very much, Tommy. So, James, if you'd like to make a closing statement, and then we can wrap things up.
Well, again, I'd like to thank you for putting this on, and it was partly my suggestion, so thanks very much for taking it up. If we're going to look at opinion polls, I do want to stress that you have to look at opinion polls in a clear-sighted way and have to look at the totality of information they're providing and not just see what you want to see. Opinion polls, they are showing that if we stopped right now and if time stood still and if the polls were absolutely accurate, yes, the SNP might win a majority of seats on the constituencies alone. But then, actually, even if they did that, you would probably want to be maximising the number of pro-independence MSPs, not reducing them. And actually, if you vote for a party that the opinion polls are showing are not going to win any seats on the list at all, with a pretty high level of confidence, particularly in the case of Rise, who are absolutely nowhere in the polls, like zero. In the poll I mentioned, Ipsos Mori, they were on 0.1%. So, I mean, a vote for Rise, if that's a tactical vote rather than a vote of principle, you might as well be throwing it in the bin. So you have to look at polls in a clear-sighted way and and not just look at this in an emotional way and say, because, we're a yes movement, we have to use different votes for different parties. Actually, the system was set up so that people would vote for their first choice party on the list because the list is the most important vote. And I would just say, finally, that I'm an American citizen as well as a UK citizen, and I voted in American elections down the years, and I voted for parties that Tommy would quite approve of. Probably I've even voted for a communist party once, and I do that because I can't vote for Democrat candidates who support the death penalty and all this kind of thing. So I totally get the idea of voting for a small fringe party if that's what you really believe in. But for heaven's sake, please only do it if you really believe in it. Because if you vote supposedly tactically for your second choice or your third choice party, and if it backfires, which it could easily do, and there's been situations like this before, then how bad are you going to feel the next day, particularly if it's cost you the pro-independence majority? So please, I would just ask people, the list vote is there to vote for your first choice party, and please do that.
Guys, thanks very much. It's been wonderful. I'm really glad we've kept the temper of the debate nice and level. It's been a very good example. There's been no Anna Sarwar-ism tonight.
Sure about
that. You've been a great example to the viewing public. Okay, I'm going to just remind viewers that later on tonight, our regular Gaelic music event is going to be on at 9 o'clock. So it's on our live stream channel. So at 9 o'clock, if you're not doing anything else, there's lots of music and entertainment for you. We are having a crowdfunder once again, so as of next week, we're going to have a crowdfund. Please give what you can, but certainly, spread the word, tweet it out, let people know, and get the word and get the buzz going. That's to keep our full-time coordinator in a position. It's to keep our premium account a membership fee topped up. Remember, we're collaborating with Bella Caledonia, we're collaborating with Common Space, we're collaborating with Kilter.com. There's an awful lot of good work coming out of independencelive.net.
Yes, too.
And Yes 2, of course. Give your support to Yes 2. read James's blog, Scot Goes Pop. I've been David McGowran. James has been James. Tommy's been Tommy. Kev's been on the technical support. Thanks very much for everyone who's joined us, and thanks very much to everybody who's contributed in the past. Please help us to get our £6,000 for our crowdfunder, which starts next week. Guys, stay on the line. We're going to end the stream, but we're going to continue the conversation. So for now, peace.